The Orzen Tribunal Station did not orbit a planet. It orbited power. A moon-sized colossus of crystal and alloy, it pulsed above a pale blue dwarf star, spinning in perfect arrogance. Over 200 alien banners fluttered digitally across its outer hull. Not one was Earth's. Not yet. Inside, on the approach ramp to the Hall of Verdicts, Ambassador Kael Draven stood motionless beneath the translucent canopy, watching the stars with his hands behind his back. He wore no robe, no ceremonial medals, just the dark, unadorned uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, the high collar pressed and plain. His boots didn't shine. His voice hadn't spoken since boarding the station 2 hours ago. Behind him, 2 aides fidgeted with datapads. One whispered, "They're broadcasting the trial live to over 100 systems. Do you want to?" Kael raised a single hand. Silence. The tribunal doors opened. He stepped forward. The Hall of Verdicts was a coliseum, not of stone, but of sonic glass, artificial gravity, and 1,000-seated species. It was too large to feel real, its acoustics engineered for silence until the one at the center chose to speak. Kael entered alone. No fanfare. Just footsteps against polished onyx, each step carrying a lifetime of war and loss. Above him, the Veari delegation sat in their shimmering armor like ornamental snakes. Their leader, Archon Veltrius, reclined with one elbow resting on a curved podium. His face was lean, silver-scaled, and utterly unimpressed. Kael didn't look at him. Instead, he walked to the circular stage at the center of the chamber, the place reserved for the accused. He didn't bow. Didn't speak. He waited. A gong chimed. The proceedings began. This tribunal convenes under Accord 7, Section 14, for judgment of interstellar violations, boomed a Trium delegate with vibrating mandibles. Subject of trial, Terra, designated Earth. Represented by Ambassador Kael Draven. Charges to be read by Chief Accuser Veltrius of the Veari Collective. Veltrius stood. He smiled. It was a dangerous thing, dry, performative, sharp at the edges. Fellow delegates. Today, we address the crimes of the Terrans, an unrefined species of carbon-blooded aggressors who, during their so-called liberation of Zalen 4, destroyed sacred Veari architecture, killed civilians, and destabilized a neutral planet. The room murmured. Veltrius' continued, voice calm. We present evidence of the desecration. The orbital shelling of the Calith Monastery. The death of 63 Veari scholars. We also note Earth's refusal to submit to High Council arbitration, instead invoking, how do they call it, strategic necessity. A few snickers from the back. Kael didn't move. Veltrius's voice dropped an octave. Earth has always been unstable. Emotional. Prone to escalation. This tribunal is their leash. Laughter now, contained but audible. Kael took it in. The mockery. The disdain. The projection. He saw a delegate with 6 eyes smirk. Another covered its mouth. One whispered too loudly, "Let's see what the savage says." The floor lighting shifted. Now it was Kael's turn to respond. The hall fell still. He stepped forward. No data scroll. No translation hub. Just his voice, unamplified, unshaking. "You came here for theater," he said plainly. "You expect emotion. Drama. Confession." His eyes swept the chamber. "I'm not here to play your part. I didn't come to beg. I came to remind you why we're still standing." Silence. Not respectful. Not yet. But attentive. He stepped closer to the tribunal's core dais. "You speak of Earth like we're your mistake. You call us unpredictable. Aggressive. Dangerous." A long pause. "You're right." Murmurs again. Movement. "Because while you debated treaties, we were pulling survivors from cities you turned into glass. While your high councils wrote policies of non-intervention, we were bleeding to hold the line you were too dignified to defend." Veltrius shifted in his seat. Kael kept going. "And now you accuse US of war crimes. You bring forged footage, crafted timelines, and mourning actors, and call it justice. A datapad blinked to life in Kael's hand. He raised it. A flicker of projection, brief, raw, unpolished. A human soldier screaming, "Don't fire near the temple! Civi's still inside!" Then static. Kael tapped the pad off. "You weren't there." "I was." Another long pause. He exhaled, but it wasn't weakness. It was control. "This trial isn't about evidence. It's about fear. You're not punishing us for what we did. You're trying to stop what comes next." He pointed toward Veltrius, not accusingly, but clinically. "You lost to us. And you can't stand that we didn't conquer you. We just survived." A single voice broke the silence from the upper row. A soft scoff. Then another chuckle. Kael turned his head. Let the laugh finish. Then said, cold as vacuum, "You think this is still a joke?" He stepped into the center of the circle. His voice was barely above a whisper now. "Then listen closely. We're not here to plead for your favor. We're here to plant a flag. Not on a world, but in this room." He took a final breath. "We've already arrived. We just haven't spoken yet." Then he stepped back. And waited. No one laughed. Not anymore. The tribunal did not clap. Applause was forbidden. But somewhere in the shadows, a single delegate adjusted their vote alignment on a private pad. It glowed yellow. Undecided. And still open. The tribunal chamber dimmed as Archon Veltrius took the floor again, his robe flowing like liquid obsidian in the downlight. His smile had vanished. The human had drawn blood, not through anger, but something far worse, influence. Veltrius would correct that. He stood before the projection dais, raised one spindled hand, and said, "The human ambassador speaks of survival. But we now present what survival looked like on Zaylan 4. A hologram snapped to life above him. It was clean, high resolution, and horrifying. Scene 1, smoke over the Calith Monastery. Veari corpses in the rubble. Scene 2, a human dropship firing into a valley, frame frozen just as a projectile streaks past a dome-shaped building. Scene 3, a wounded Veari child, blood on its face, staring into a cracked lens. Veltrius didn't narrate the images. He didn't need to. The silence of the chamber said more than words could. 63 Veari scholars died that day, he said at last, including Eldermind Vaylor, whose lineage extends back to the original Concord signing. He turned to Kael. "And now you claim moral clarity?" Kael didn't blink. Veltrius pivoted. His next slide was historical, Earth's own documented horrors. Footage of mushroom clouds. Black and white stills from Earth's darkest wars. Colonialism. Extinctions. Sweatshops. Drones. Pollution. Riots. "You speak of remembering your sins," Veltrius said coolly. "But history is not penance. It is evidence. Earth's record shows a species that thrives on consumption, conquest, and chaos." He let it hang there, floating over the tribunal. Then, softly, "You joined the Concord only 94 years ago. And already you wear armor?" Another laugh. Smaller this time. Nervous. Kael stood still, his hands behind his back, jaw tight but steady. Ambassador Tval of the Zarin leaned over to appear. "They'll vote before sundown. This won't go Earth's way." Back at the defense table, Kael's aide whispered through gritted teeth. "We need to offer a plea. Reduce standing. Humanitarian aid restrictions, just give them something." Kael didn't answer. He stared straight ahead as Veltrius activated his final frame. A hollow-eyed Veari mother, wrinkled, clutching a burnt robe, spoke directly into the projection. "I watched the Terrans come. I begged for mercy. They walked past my dying mate to secure the hill. They saw my child beneath the rubble, and kept walking." The hall's light dimmed to gray. The tribunal speaker shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was what Veltrius wanted. Not justice. Consensus. Kael lowered his eyes for the first time. But not in shame. In calculation. Later, in the private waiting chamber, Kael stood alone before the slotted window. Orzen's star flickered like a pulse. His aide sat stiffly on the bench behind him. "You should say something," she whispered. Kael tapped the glass once. Then twice. "They're not reacting to the footage," he said. "They're reacting to how they look when it plays." The aide frowned. "I don't follow." "They're not mad at us for fighting," Kael said, turning back. "They're mad we made them choose between truth and order." She looked at him, tired. "You've got one shot to flip this. One more address. Then it's exile." Kael nodded once. "Good." That night, he watched the raw audio logs from Zaylan 4 again. The real ones. Not the clipped edits. A soldier's voice, raspy, shaken, filtered through the speaker. "Sir, there's a dome up ahead, could be the temple. Hold fire. Civilians inside. They're using it for comms relays. Enemy tech. Still not risking it. Not today." Then silence. Then the impact of something else, alien, heavy, distant. Kael shut the feed. He whispered, "You tried to bury us with our own restraint." The tribunal reconvened the next morning. The mood was colder now. Veltrius wore victory on his face. The tribunal speaker rose. "The defense will now respond. 1 hour. No extensions." All eyes turned to the center. Kael rose slowly. Walked forward. No day pads. No visuals. No theatrics. Just the weight of every burned city, every dead comrade, every moral compromise he'd ever swallowed to keep Earth alive in a galaxy where empathy was entertainment. "You've all seen what the Ve'ari showed you," he began. "But not one of you asked how their footage was captured in full clarity during an active war zone." He let that linger. A few heads tilted. "You watched their testimony," he said. "But no one mentioned that Ve'ari military comms were found routing through the same monastery they claim was sacred." A few murmurs now. Kael exhaled slowly. "You call us aggressive because we didn't break. You call us invaders because we refuse to be erased. You call us monsters because we bleed and don't apologize for it." He took one more step forward. "But let me ask you this. When your ships needed escort through the pirate corridors, who flew point? When the Greth plague hit Valaseven, who dropped food without landing rights? When your own mercenaries turned on you, who answered the distress call?" He looked up. His voice dropped to a whisper. "We did." The chamber stilled. Kael looked at Veltrius. "You wanted a trial. Not for truth. But to remind us we don't belong here." He turned back to the crowd. "But we do. Because unlike most of you, we haven't forgotten what the cost of peace really looks like." The lights dimmed. The tribunal would vote the next day. But something had changed. Not in the laws. In the room. The laughter was gone. Kael returned to the tribunal's central podium as if stepping into a battlefield. There were no allies here, not really. A few seats had stopped smirking. A handful of eyes looked uncertain now. That was enough. He tapped the small control disk at his hip. "I request playback from classified footage archive Alpha Zaylan, timestamp 37.11.209.6. The speaker hesitated. Veltrius stood. "Objection. Those records were sealed." "They were sealed by you," Kael cut in. "This is evidence, verifiable, untampered, from your own orbital surveillance." The speaker tilted his head. The override mark pulsed on Kael's badge. "Objection denied. Proceed." The projection lit the air. But this time, there was no screaming. No gore. No conveniently framed debris. Just a squad of human soldiers crouched beneath a ridge. Their helmets glowed faint blue. Their rifles were powered down. In the distance, a crystalline spire shimmered, Calith Monastery, untouched, intact. "Sir, they're jamming us from the dome." "Confirmed. High-frequency relay embedded in the roof." "Orders?" The commanding officer's voice, clear, firm. "Do not fire. Civilians inside. We cut the signal another way." A low hiss, then silence. Understood. Moving east, flanking comms hub. The feed ended. Kael let it hang in the air. No words. The chamber murmured again, not with judgment, but with confusion. He raised a second clip. This one showed a Veari gunship, its insignia unmistakable, firing near the same monastery 2 hours later. That's your footage, Kael said flatly. Not ours. From your own regional commander's flight log. A Zarin delegate turned to whisper to another. A Valari minister leaned forward. Kael continued. You were losing the region. You needed a martyr. So you created one. Veltrius rose in protest. You dishonor the dead. You used them. Kael snapped, finally letting anger sharpen his voice. You stood on their bones and called it justice. He stepped back from the dais, voice low now. This trial wasn't about a monastery. It was about Earth. About fear. Because you all watched us crawl into this concord bleeding and broken, and we didn't die. He turned slowly, scanning the chamber. We learned. We adapted. We rebuilt. And now that we're not on our knees, you call it aggression? Then Kael did something unexpected. He looked at the Veari delegate directly beside Veltrius. Elder Varn, he said, your brother served at Calith before the war. He taught history there. Did he tell you what the fourth pillar inside the monastery read? The elder hesitated. Eyes widened. Kael nodded toward the projection sphere. Translate this. Ancient script scrolled in golden characters across the air. Then the human translation appeared. Truth without burden is hollow. Memory without pain is propaganda. Kael stepped back, folding his arms. We remembered. At the defense table, his aide whispered, stunned. Where did you get the pillar quote? Didn't, Kael murmured. I memorized it during recon 2 years ago. I knew they'd erase it. Veltrius stood slowly. He didn't attack. He didn't object. But his eyes were no longer cold. They were calculating. Quiet. He knew he'd lost the room. And yet, he had one final card to play. He activated a new projection, this one locked behind clause 44, an emergency override privilege. If we're putting truth above narrative, Veltrius said, then allow me one final image. The chamber dimmed again. This time, Kael Draven, 20 years younger, in battle armor. Standing over a captured Kravari warlord, kneeling, wounded, disarmed. A standoff. Then, without ceremony, Kael fires. Execution. No trial. No hesitation. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Kael's aide looked up in shock. Veltrius let the silence burn. This is your ambassador. The defender of justice. The great moral voice of Terra. He turned. What say you now, Draven? Kael didn't flinch. He stepped forward once more. His voice was quiet, but surgical. That warlord ordered the torching of an evacuation ship filled with civilians 2 hours prior. 300 dead. Including 17 children. He was captured en route to a second target. A medical outpost. Kael scanned the chamber again. No projection this time. Just his voice. I shot him. Not for vengeance. Not for conquest. I shot him because if I didn't, he'd walk again. Another silence. Then Kael added. We're not clean. We never said we were. But we're accountable. You think you're afraid of what we'll do? He looked directly at the Valari, the Zarin, the Kravari. You're afraid we'll hold you to the same standard. There it was. The shift. Not from applause. But from posture. Eyes turned inward. Delegates began tapping notes, quietly changing their votes. Veltrius lowered his head. For the first time, he said nothing. As Kael returned to his seat, the speaker rose. The Tribunal will deliberate. Verdict to be delivered at orbital cycle dawn. The chamber emptied slowly. No laughter. No jeers. Only silence. And the sound of one man who had made the galaxy listen. Dawn on Orzen Station wasn't natural. There was no sun to rise, no horizon to chase the darkness. But still, at the appointed cycle, the interior lights across the station warmed a shade softer, and the great hall's vault shifted from sterile blue to solemn amber. The vote was ready. Kael stood alone at the defense platform. His aides had remained outside. They didn't need to be here for this. He wanted no whispering distractions, no anxious glances. Just truth. Just consequences. The hall filled slowly. Silent delegates, some with heads down, others with fingers clasped tightly, entered their seats one by one. The Valari, the Zarin, the Kravari, even the Veari ministers, none of them met Kael's eyes. But none were laughing any more either. The speaker rose. His voice was calm, flat. Under Concord Statute 92 Delta, after full presentation of evidence and under unanimous consent of procedural completion, this tribunal now enters final judgment. A floating screen unfolded above the center. Species, Homo sapiens Earth. Charge, interstellar violation, Class 2, cultural desecration, civilian endangerment. Verdict options: guilty, sanction, guilty, expulsion, not guilty, cleared, not guilty, elevated. Rows of delegates voted silently through neural taps or datapad glances. Light by light, the result formed across the display. And then, not guilty, elevated. 112 votes. 1 abstain. 0 guilty. The chamber did not erupt in celebration. It exhaled. Like something had shifted and no one quite knew how to live in the new air. Kael didn't react. He didn't smile. He just stood still as the speaker continued. Effective immediately, Terra is granted full High Council status within the Galactic Concord. All prior probationary articles are lifted. Seat assignments will be updated for the next session. The speaker paused, then added, uncharacteristically, Ambassador Draven, the floor is yours. Kael walked slowly to the center once more. But this time, there was no burden in his step. Only gravity. He looked across the room. All of them had judged Earth. Now they had to listen to it. You thought this trial would put us in our place. No protests. You thought we would apologize for surviving. For fighting back. For being unwilling to forget where we came from. A few heads lowered. But this wasn't a trial of Earth. It was a mirror held up to you. He turned toward the Veari. You called us dangerous because we remember. To the Valari. You mocked us for our passion while you institutionalized silence. To the Kravari. You once called us barbarians with bullets. Now you call us counselor. He let it sit. The quiet. The reversal. Then he added. We never asked for your fear. We only asked for your respect. Now we have both. He began to step away, then paused, turning back. And one more thing. The room froze. You laughed at the beginning of this hearing. Some of you laughed loudly. Others just watched. He raised his hand slowly, fingers splayed. I want you to remember this moment the next time a human walks into your chambers, or your war rooms, or your homes. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it cut deeper than any shout. We're not here for applause. We're here to build something that lasts longer than your memory of laughing at us. Kael turned, walked toward the exit. A Valari delegate rose quietly and bowed her head. So did the Zarin. So did others. Veltrius remained seated. But he did not speak. He simply watched the human walk out. And wondered what would come next. Epilogue, 1 week later. A secure signal pulsed through the private channels of every major species. Encrypted. Verified. It contained one message. Let the galaxy laugh. Let them mock. Then give them silence. And make them listen. Kael Draven, High Counselor of Earth. Final line. The human had spoken. And now the stars were listening.